The target pattern for this lecture is I'm afraid that. I'm afraid that. Now, you might have noticed that was in brackets, which means it's optional in this pattern. We can say I'm afraid or I'm afraid that. So we have two options for this pattern. Let's look at the meaning of I'm afraid that. I'm afraid that you didn't get the job. So in this sentence, what does I'm afraid that mean? We use it for politely introducing bad news, sad news, news that might make someone angry, or disagreement. So we use it for one of these things. It's very similar to the phrase, I'm sorry, but. So that's the meaning of I'm afraid that. So if you want to tell someone some bad news or something sad, some disagreement, it's usually some kind of negative news or negative comment. We can use I'm afraid that before the comment. It's very similar, like I said, to the phrase I'm sorry, but For example, if I say you didn't get the job, this is quite bad news, right? If I'm the boss and I'm interviewing you and I say you didn't get the job. If I simply say you didn't get the job, it sounds a bit cold and a bit harsh. So if we want to soften the bad news, if we want to make it less severe, we use this phrase, I'm afraid that. So you're warning the person that there's something bad about to happen. Some bad news is coming. So I can say, I'm afraid that you didn't get the job. You see? Or another example might be someone failed the driving test. I wouldn't normally say, you failed your test. This is very direct and harsh. Instead, we can say, I'm afraid you failed your test. It sounds much softer and it's much more pleasant when giving bad news or when you're disagreeing with someone. Let's look at the examples to make everything much, much clearer. Hi, Lisa. My car broke down, so I'm afraid I'm going to be an hour late. So here we have the English pattern, I'm afraid. This time we didn't use that. We simply said, I'm afraid. I'm afraid I'm going to be an hour late. So why is this bad news? Well, perhaps she's on the phone to her boss, Lisa. And if you're an hour late, it's not very good for the company or the business. So it's quite bad news, right? It's negative news. In this case, we can say, I'm afraid I'm going to be an hour late. It means I'm sorry, but I'm going to be late. So this is a perfect time to use I'm afraid. Here's another example. I'm afraid I won't be able to attend the party tomorrow. I have too much work to finish. So again, this is not terrible news or devastating news, but it's quite negative. I'm afraid I won't be able to go to the party tomorrow. So you're telling your friend, I'm sorry, but I can't go because I'm too busy. In this case, we can say, I'm afraid that I can't go to the party tomorrow. You're making the bad news or the negative news less severe. Here's one more example for you. So person A says, hello, Can I speak to Peter? And the other person on the phone says, I'm afraid he's away today. So you can see the news doesn't always have to be very, very bad or very severe. It can be just very slight negative news, like this example. So someone called and said, can I speak to Peter? And the person at the other end of the line said, I'm afraid he's not here today. So this news is not very sad or very tragic, but it's just a little bit negative for the other person because he wants to speak to Peter. But even if it's just a tiny bit negative, it's polite to say, I'm afraid that he's not here. You see? So even if it's slightly negative news, we can use this English pattern. Now, what's the structure of this pattern? I'm afraid that. Let's have a look at the structure. The basic structure is I'm afraid that plus subject plus a verb. For example, I'm afraid I'm going to be an hour late. So that's the English pattern, I'm afraid that. Remember the meaning when you move on to the listening and speaking practice exercises. Keep the meaning in your mind. Always remember the meaning so that it can become clearer for you. You can understand it more deeply and you can master this English pattern. See you in the next lecture.